You know what? I'm left-handed, so this is good. There you go. I think it's kind of a small. You want these guys to just spin like that. Yeah. So when it wants to sound, I can give you a lay of the land.
I did not. I guess we have to be neighbors again. How are you, Jean?
Hi, John. I don't think we've ever met in person. Nice to see you, Candice.
When you want to speak, just grab the mic left to the right.
So it doesn't have to be close to your
It
mouth.
doesn't have to be terribly close,
like
just
that.
as long as it's in your direction. Yeah.
Okay.
Today, no, on the station. The Rich Works show in Warren. Oh, yeah. Oh, I think you should. Didn't you already do one with her? You call me or you want to be in a Steve? Rick. Sure, what else? Hello.
Act 127.
Hello.
60. It's hard to remember.
You can keep it high level. You don't get him.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Okay, and we'll rotate.
Okay, then John will be the next one.
And help us a little bit.
Yeah.
Part of this.
Right. Yeah, we'll listen when you tell me. It's genius to have these guys do it together. Thank you.
well, I was thinking we should the BT Digger, the Vermont Public like this. Good evening, everyone. Could everyone come forward who wants to sit down? And you're also welcome to stand till your feet get tired.
And there's chairs in the back.
There are two board chairs in the back. There's 3 or 4 seats up here as well. Thank you all for coming. My name is Lisa Loomis. I'm with the Valley Reporter, and with me is my co-host, Eric Friedman, Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank all of you for coming and thank our 4 candidates, and thank you especially for caring enough to run. I want to thank MRV TV and the Shea family and Afterthoughts for hosting us here tonight. This is a great venue. We're excited to be here. Candidates will be giving a 1-minute prepared statement, and then we will proceed through some questions that we have, Eric and I. Then we'll take your questions, and if there's time at the end of that, we'll take questions that the candidates have prepared for each other. Please turn off your cell phones, and without further ado, I'm going to ask the candidate to start with a 1-minute opening statement, and the first question goes to Jean.
Oh, no, this is the second time
Hello. Well, that was loud. Hi, my name is Gene Bifano. This is the second time I'm running for the House seat. The first time I had the opportunity to shake hands, drive around. This year I couldn't. I had extensive knee surgery. The doctor said you were doing. So I've had a low profile, but the thing is, all the issues that were present last year are present today. I'm running because I don't want to leave the Valley. And all the taxes, the climate action bill, the payroll taxes, I don't want to leave, but so I decided to fight, and that's why I'm here. I have extensive business career of 45 years in major corporations, solving problems, creating innovative ways to solve problems. 38 years firefighter, EMT, and 11 years as a cop. So I've experienced all these issues that people talk about in social. I've seen them all life. I grew up in the Bronx, 5-story top floor. So again, I'm looking to be your representative as an independent.
Thank you, Jean. John, 1 minute.
Hello, folks. Thanks for coming. I'm a lifelong Vermonter and lifelong observer of Vermont politics. We're in bad shape. Howard Dean has said fiscal catastrophe, and he has called it a poisonous atmosphere, our current political state. That's one of the things that motivated me to run. I want to try to fix this. Our polarized government is, I think, the biggest issue. I meet people that are leaving Vermont. They can't afford it. That is unhealthy. Our governor is, I'm amazed at how many people are supportive of the governor. They say, thank God for the governor to balance out this runaway legislature. Folks, we elect this legislature. We can stop this if and when we want to. We can stop at this election. If you've had enough, you want to vote for me and send me as an independent to Montpelier. If you want to keep on with this pain, you can send the incumbent back to Montpelier.
Hi, everyone. A little bit spicy this time with my neighbor, John. It's been an amazing experience to be here over the last 2 years. And it's a historic term. We had unbelievable highs and lows over the last 2 years. I've learned an incredible amount. I got to serve with Rep. Dolan, who is an inspiration and who accomplished so much for our valley. And I want to run and I want to serve again. I want to be able to put what I've learned into play on your behalf. And I want to share with you my sense that it's not poisonous at all. We do have some political tension with the governor and the administration that we can work better together for sure. But for me, the biggest challenge we face is the capacity of our government, both our administration, our agencies, and our state house, our legislators, having the information and resources that we need
That's
to
time.
meet these big issues we face.
Thank you, Dara. Candice?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Candice White. I'm running for state representative also. I've lived in Waitsfield for a little bit more than 20 years, and I call Vermont home, although I'm not a native Vermonter. I grew up in upstate New York and North Carolina, went to Boston for college, and I was there for about 20 years before I came to Vermont in 2003. I have a pretty extensive professional background. I worked for national magazines in Boston and New York. I've been a freelance writer and editor, and then I served on Sugarbush's executive team for 10 years before going into communications consulting, which I continue to do. I've also volunteered extensively. I was president of the Waitsfield PTA. I served on the Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation board
10
for
seconds.
6 years and was chair, and I currently co-chair the Vermont Women's Fund. I'm a collaborator. I like to solve problems. I am committed to working across
That's
the
1
aisle
minute.
to solve our problems and make Vermont better. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm handing the mic over to Eric for our first prepared question. And this one starts, John.
With Gene. No, we're sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Our first question for today is Vermont's recent property tax increase was passed after overriding Governor Scott's veto. How how did you or would you justify the necessity of this increase? And how do you plan to ensure that middle class and working class families aren't disproportionately affected?
Well, if I understand the question, I would not justify the necessity of the increase of the property tax. It is another, as I understand it, it's the last 5 years, the property taxes have increased over 10% each year. And we kind of lost track of that in COVID a bit, and it was kind of hidden by the sales tax. But did I understand the question correctly? I do not justify that increase. So, and that is one of the main issues, one of the biggest issues, and reason that I'm running is to find some fix, help find some fix for this property tax issue that has been going on. I remember the first year Phil Scott was in office, he said, we've got to fix property taxes. He's running for his 5th term, and it is
10 seconds, John.
this property tax increase has gotten worse. It is broken. I was looking on Candice's website, I think yesterday, she said it's broken. I think we all agree it's broken.
Thank you. Let's hear from Dara.
Okay, so yes, our property tax liability that we're all struggling with is untenable. And it's going to erode our ability to have a rich community, diverse people. And so it's a crisis. I think there's wide agreement that we need to address affordability in the state. And we do understand that the cost of education is a big driver, and that that's going to take a lot of attention in right-sizing our education system while preserving quality. And then we need a fairer way to distribute the burden. And we have to look at non-property taxes for how we do that. And we do currently have income subsidy to help people below 128,000 to
10 seconds.
pay for their property taxes. But because 70% of Vermonters are already getting some sort of support for income, we're thinking perhaps of moving away from
That's
the property
time.
tax.
Candice?
So, okay, I would not have voted for that. I don't, if I were in the legislature, I think that the property tax increase was, insulting is not the right word, but I think everybody was pretty flabbergasted with the increases. And it's reflective of a school funding system which is broken. And this is not news, but it seems to have come to a head this year. I really think that we need to try to just blow up the school funding mechanism and redo it. It was figured out almost 25 years ago, and it's causing unintended consequences. And a lot of people in our county can't afford to live here and are worrying about where to go. So other states have property tax caps. I think that is something to consider.
Let's
I also
10 seconds to go.
I also think we need to look at spending. So not just, where we can get more money, but I think we've got to prioritize our school spending and pay for what's most important and cut some things we
That's
can't
time.
afford.
Thank you, Candice. Jean?
I agree with you. The tax increase was untoward. And the reason is the beginning, when they created Act 60, it's based, the way it decided to do it was fault. It was fair. They went after our ski towns. The law was structured so they would go after the second homeowners. The problem is they didn't realize that when they did that, they would also affect people who lived here. Then they got 68, which is income assistance. But then they realized that 70% of those people are on income assistance. So somebody had to make up the difference. You keep going, trying to fix it. Candice was right. These systems got to be redone. It really has to do things like they should not be getting our tax money, and they do. Their budget's $119 million. They have
10 seconds.
So anyway, the system's broken. It needs to be fixed, but the structure of the schools have to be fixed. There's nothing we can do. There's no extra money because we already have sales
That's
tax
time.
and income.
Thank you. Jean. Before I read the next question, there are 3 seats, 4 seats, 5 seats, 6 seats up front if anybody does not want to stand. Okay. The next question will start with Dara. Given the direct consumer costs associated with the Vermont Clean Heat Standard, do you support it? Why or why not? How would you achieve similar reductions in carbon emissions without directly impacting those who can least afford?
Okay, in 1 minute, this will it's a very complicated bill, but the idea behind it is a good one. It's the plan that we need to follow to get our fossil fuel energy system transitioned to cleaner alternatives. Our heating is a big part of what we spend our money on. And there are a lot of ways we can still be warm in our homes without having to continue to pollute. So the idea behind it is that we would have a managed transition, that we would have a way of raising money to fund it in an ongoing way. It's a good idea. And all it is right now is an idea. It's being vetted currently, and a rule will be drafted for the legislators to consider in January. And the issue of cost
10
is
seconds.
really, really important. So cost will be something that could prevent this particular type of plan from happening. But
That's time. Thank you.
So we all are seeing the results of climate change. So we know that having a climate change policy is the right thing for Vermont. Um, I'm I'm not sure the clean heat standard is the right approach within climate change. Um, I just looked at a report that actually John shared from the Public Utility Commission, looking at the clean heat standard, and some of the determinations were Vermont is too small and this is too costly for Vermont, creating this credit marketplace and third parties to administer it. I'd really like us to see, we have to focus on affordability. And so, why don't we look at new construction and let's make sure new construction has clean heat standards going forward. And so we'll start building new clean heat buildings, and then we'll take a look at our existing buildings and homes. And but we need to make changes that Vermont can afford. And I think the clean heat standard is just causing too much consternation
That's
about cost.
time. Thank you, Candice. Jean?
Clean heat standard. In fact, what I read was Efficiency Vermont was given the task of managing it, and they realized that it couldn't be done. They told the PUC it couldn't be done. So the whole thing is scrapped right now. Has to go back to the legislature. That is absolutely the wrong way to do it. In fact, everything, all these climate bills that are proposed are going to cost more money than we have, and they're not going to accomplish their goal. When you think about Vermont, it's a small state. We have the second smallest carbon footprint in the country, really small. And we're trying to see what on this turnip. We look at global environment. China has 1,142 coal plants. They're building 17 more. India, all these countries are not following the rules. So whatever we do here in Vermont is minimus. We
10 seconds.
can do things to figure out how to lower the carbon footprint without going bigger. And all these bills put together.
All right, thank you, Gene. Our next question, we're going to start with Candice.
Wait, I didn't go.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I forgot about you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Right, so clean heat standards, right? Vermont's a small state. We're already a very polluting state, and we're dropping the bucket compared to China, India, these other nations that put out tons of pollution. The clean heat standard is not needed. It's an experiment. I've already said I will vote no for it if I'm no on it if I'm there in January. I'll cut to the chase. So with the Clean Heat Standard is to support this Global Warming Solutions Act. That's the law that was passed a couple years ago, which included the provision that if we don't meet these standards, we're subject to being sued. Okay, so if you're a legislator and you create a law that says, by the way, if we don't do this, we're going to allow ourselves to be sued, that's called malfeasance. You're not doing your job. You're
10 seconds,
violating
John.
your oath to protect people, to allow them to be subject to lawsuits. It is backwards legislation.
Thank you, John. Our next question, we're going to start with Candice this time. Rising taxes and costs of living have impacted small businesses in the Mad River Valley. How do you plan to support local entrepreneurs and small business owners in a way that ensures their continued success and contribution to the community?
One of the issues I think small businesses are facing, Eric, is a lack of affordable housing for their employees. And if employees can't afford to live here, they can't work here. So, I think the affordable housing issue is affecting so many industries. And there. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Some of the Act 250 changes in the last legislature, I think, are positive, and it's supposed to make it easier to develop in urban areas, concentrated areas like downtown Waitsfield. Whether or not Sugarbush up on the mountain should be another designated area, I would suggest it might make sense because they also have a lot of infrastructure that has already been built and they're already on
10
affordable
seconds.
housing projects. So I look at housing as a real savior for them.
Yep, Gene?
So, yeah. So one of the things we can do, there are a lot of payroll taxes, 2 payroll taxes that our businesses have to pay. They pay that, we pay that. So we need to look at what we've done. The Family Leave Act is a total disaster. The governor had a better plan to provide family leave to all working Vermonters. This law hires 55 people according to the Joint Committee of the Assembly. They're going to hire 55 people to administer. So people paying in are paying for these employees. The point is, housing is an issue. It is a regional issue. And the fact that people can't work or live in the town they work in, I commuted my whole career. At one time, I drove 70 miles each way because that's where my job was. So we have to find places where we can build affordable housing. But the key is,
10 seconds.
we don't pay for it. We make it available and reasonable for developers to spend their money to build affordable housing. Change the tax, change the
Time.
planning. So
John?
Yeah, I agree. Housing is what I'm calling a fundamental issue. That so many things come back to housing and the lack of housing. As I walk around, I meet people that are, where are my kids going to live when they grow up? And there's and that the lack of housing directly relates to and contributes to the cost of living, this enormous cost of living. But your question about community, local community, I'll go back to the school property tax issue again. There's so much money that has just been diverted into the school system, and it seems like a black hole. There's got to be some money in there and a way to fix that education funding system that allows there to just be more money overall, just to be put back into the community for things like recreation paths,
10 seconds.
community amenities for just local level things. Right now, that money all goes into this black hole of the education funding.
Thank you. Dara?
Yes. I would add, housing for sure is definitely
Can you hear Dara?
a drag on our businesses as well. And we did do good work to try to, at least on the regulatory side and the land use side, make it easier for housing to be developed. There's a lot more that has to come into play to make that happen. The other good things that we accomplished that can help our businesses is with workforce. We've invested a lot in workforce and workforce training, but also in making childcare more available and higher quality. We brought on 1,000 more spots in our childcare centers, and that allows people to actually work. So that's an investment we need to continue to make.
10 seconds.
And the other thing I see our businesses really needing is more support when they get flooded and have impacts from climate change.
Thank you. Time.
The next question, I'm going to start with Jean again. The negotiated increase in the cost of healthcare coverage for educators and school staff is 18 to 20% this year. There's no we can selectively reduce programming in our school to absorb such a large increase. How will you help our district and others in the state that are impacted by this contract, which is negotiated at a state level and imposed on us? Can educators' healthcare be part of the Vermont State employees contract? What are your solutions?
That, if you look at any business, the biggest expense in any business is basic. So if you look at business, biggest expenses are employees and healthcare costs. There are plenty of people in the valley who do not have healthcare coverage. There are plenty of people that pay an awful lot. So I think we have to look at how these contracts are negotiated, and they shouldn't be that generous because we are paying for it. They're can't even afford insurance, and they are the ones paying for it. So I think we have to go back and look at the whole negotiation process because all that costs is in simplification. Clearly, people need healthcare costs, but the whole system is broken. You need to look at that. I mean, there's so many broken systems, by the way, but it's fixed.
Okay, interesting question. I've always wondered why teachers aren't just state employees. Can't be made employees. That'd be okay. I was a state employee. It was pretty good. You know, a lot of state employees, they seem to have it pretty good. They're pretty happy with their health care, with their benefits. It's good. It seems like a good, stable employment. So I don't understand. I don't have enough information right now to understand why NEA has such influence that seems to carve out a separate place for themselves in Vermont, while we also have Vermont state employees, unions, and contracts. Could those just be combined? That seems simple. That seems efficient. I think our government could use efficiency in many ways.
Thank you, John. Dara?
Yes, healthcare was one of the major cost drivers of the spike in education budgets. And I think it even amounted to, in our case, 5 cents tax rate. So it's real. And it's, I don't know if you've been tracking the healthcare study that came out recently, but our whole healthcare system is very expensive and unsustainable. And our health insurance premiums are out of sight. And there's no relief in sight unless we really reform how healthcare is delivered in our state. It's very similar to the prescription for our schools and the fact that we have this diffuse population all over the state with needs everywhere, but not scale, means we have a lot of cost. So we have to do the same thing that we're doing in education, in
10
healthcare.
seconds.
And one of the practical things we might be able to do in the interim, in addition to thinking about the state employee issue that's been brought up, is reference-based pricing and other strategies to lower costs.
Thank you. That's time. Candice?
So just following up on what Dara was saying, I was actually just listening to the part of that Green Mountain Care Board presentation today. The healthcare situation in Vermont is very dire. The predictions when we get to 2028 are that I think most all of the hospitals will be in bankruptcy. I mean, it's pretty dire. So, and you know, we have, it sounds like maybe too many hospitals, maybe too many schools, but then we need housing. So, you know, is there some opportunity there for reimagining some of these buildings that we can't afford? I don't work in healthcare. I really am not going to pretend to have an answer for healthcare other than to say that healthcare costs are impacting so many other sectors of Vermont, and it really requires some work, some major changes. And it sounds like the Green Mountain Care Board is going in that direction.
The next question is about housing. Vermont's housing crisis is affecting families and businesses alike. What is your plan for expanding access to affordable housing in Vermont, and how can we ensure that development balances growth with the preservation of Vermont's unique character? We'll start with John.
Just a little follow-up. I was reading a report on from the Green Mountain Care Board And they said the number one issue to address healthcare issues is housing. Again, it's a foundational, fundamental issue for so many. Act 250 reform. It didn't go far enough. We have to be able to build also in communities like this. I've seen some of the building. I've heard some of the stories of local builders who are just swamped with tens of thousands of dollars in fees just to build 10 or 20 houses. That's not necessary. It shouldn't be that hard to build some houses. We can balance building nice new houses with keeping our environmental approach to Vermont.
10
Living,
seconds.
living in concert with the land. There's a way to do that. We have room to build, and we need to.
Thanks. Thank you, John. Dara?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure, glad to. Vermont's housing crisis is affecting families and businesses alike. What is your plan for expanding access to affordable housing in Vermont? How can you ensure that development balances growth with preservation of Vermont's character?
Right. So our work on the Act 250 statute was pretty monumental this term. It was decades in the making to reform it and to make it easier to build in the right places and protect the really fragile areas that we need to protect. In terms of where we live, we are in, we have our village centers, but we also have a lot of what is called Tier 2 in the new approach. And that is an area that's going to be studied a lot more in the next term. And I would really like to be involved in that because I want to see areas like ours be able to accommodate more people. And then the other big thing that we need for housing and affordable housing is a sustained funding of it. We have had a lot of money, the ARPA money from the pandemic, and we invested in many, many developments, but we have to keep at it. And that's why we worked hard and found a way to fund more affordable housing.
Candice?
So yes, we need more affordable housing, and that's affecting a lot of different industries. I'd love to see. I think this is an opportunity for some big creative thinking, and I think Jean mentioned getting the private sector involved. Relying on developers, but I'd like to see developers, they're nonprofits working on this problem. Um, Regional development corporations I talked about, I've had some experience working with them, but they are set up around the state and are really great resources in terms of knowing the businesses in their counties and being able to pull different businesses. If we were to get together architects and developers and clean energy environmentalists and just do some brainstorming, I think we could come up with some good ideas how to fast track affordable housing, but really embracing all different, not just business, not just the state, not just the feds.
So it's a complicated issue, but government spending really isn't the appropriate way to do it. There are ways to do your planning, your zoning. I just read that Waitsfield was going to donate land to a developer to build reasonable housing. Affordable housing is a very specific term in HUD. What we're talking about is housing for people who work but need something they can afford. And the issue there is when you build affordable housing and you give somebody a house for $4,000, $400,000, 2 years from now, that house is going to be worth $600, and they're going to sell that house. They're going to make a profit. Guess what happens? Your affordable housing goes out the door. So we first have to know who these people are and what we're going to build. Are we going to build garden apartments? Are we going to build townhouses? Let's figure out who
10
needs
seconds.
housing and what kind of housing we're going to pay for, and give developers the wherewithal to go through and minimize the money we're
That's a
taking out of
minute.
our
Thank you.
pockets.
This next question starts with Dara. The Mad River Valley and Waterbury has been in 18 months, as have Montpelier, Berry, and other parts of central Vermont. How many times do you think it is reasonable to build in the same location after flooding? legislator, how will you help people move homes and businesses out of harm's way, and how will you fund
That's a good question. Some people are choosing to elevate their homes and fill in their basements. Some people decide to actually do a buyout. And what we've learned is a real gap in time for that FEMA federal buyout money to come to homeowners to make that hard choice. And so one thing I would like to see our state do is figure out how to fill in the gap and be able to fund those buyouts so people aren't on the hook for a long time waiting. And then at the same time, we have to have a place for them to go. We don't want to lose people from our communities. So we should think about a land bank. Think about having a place set aside for that's safer, combines with our plans for health. And that's what I'd like to see. And more help for the individuals as they are facing damage to their driveways.
So the flooding devastation, yeah, continues. And, I was doing some door knocking in Facein and Waitsfield and saw people whose lost cars, whose houses had been condemned. So we know it's real and it's continuing. And what's the best way to solve that? One, I went to a Matter Valley planning district meeting a couple weeks ago, and Josh Ford gave a great presentation on Hurricane Irene and what we learned from Hurricane Irene, and we looked at changes that Waitsfield made to the town area that was flooded after Irene, and there were some really great changes. So, I think we need to continue to look at where the damage is, and we can't continue to rebuild buildings that are in harm's way. We need to relocate those by learning from the storms and careful planning. I think we can help our community get to a better place.
That's 1 minute. Gene?
Continued flooding will, if we'll accept that climate change is changing the dynamics in this water will keep coming. So one of the things I keep thinking about, the state did a study, and from what I read, they can only implement 33% of the recommendations they had. They say, we don't have the money. So I look around and say, where can we get this money? Now, there's tons of money was set aside for climate change, all these, I read someplace somewhere in a $250 million. So let's start looking at money set aside for the future, spend it to. We should think about how we can create avenues for that water to flow around cities like Montpelier, and maybe start thinking about how we might be able to use that extra water energy to create electricity. Those are great stores, and some people. We look at Dam, we're lucky. Green Mountain Power, we get 60%.
Okay, flooding. So this is climate change impact in Vermont. When we look at global warming solutions and clean heat standards, these are distractions from what's happening in Vermont that's impacting Vermonters' lives. So let's stop going with these schemes and these fancy plans to save the world from climate change, and let's help Vermonters. I do think there is things we can do to prevent flooding. Maybe once you rebuild once, and that's it. People shouldn't have to go through that more than once. The Secretary of Natural Resources, Julie Moore, said this may sound funny coming from Secretary Dara, but we need to look at things like moving our rivers, dredging, opening up floodplains, diverting water, and that can be done with a minimal environment. New Orleans is holding back the ocean storm after their major flood years ago. So I think we can do some things to adjust rivers and prevent flooding again.
John. We're going to take a little break and start taking some questions from the audience. At this point, does anyone have a question that they would like?
We'll be bringing the microphone to you, and we'd like you to state your name and hometown. So just raise your hand. We'll bring you the microphone, and don't be shy.
Suzanne Lowen Facein. Dara, you mentioned land banks. Can you talk more about that idea?
Don't know a whole lot about it, but I know there's a senator who is championing the idea, but it's basically for a town, a municipality to plan ahead and and start procuring some land that can be then deployed when needed. Because people who've lost their homes should be prioritized, I think, when they're making that difficult choice. And I've been helping at some flood relief in Waterbury actually with my husband, and we went to a house that had been flooded twice and was actually a mobile home type structure that could easily be moved.
Kai Koich, I live in Facein. Seems like in the valley, a lot of houses are getting gobbled up for short term. How is that contributing to our housing problem? It seems like it's significant. Sure.
So short-term rentals, they may be a problem. I mean, on the one hand, I think they bring a lot of people. Is this okay? People who come for ski vacations, they offer more beds. When I was at Sugarbush, we used to always say we don't have enough bed base in the valley, so short-term rentals were helpful. But on the other hand, are they full time? You know, Warren is working on a short-term rental policy, which I think the rest of the valley is planning on adopting. Um, and that's basically just, they're going to start collecting information so that we know how many short-term rentals, who owns them, and start to get some data so we can do something with it. So I don't want to say whether they're good or bad, but I think data collection and knowing what we've got is the first step.
That is a big issue. I believe that short-term rentals are taking money out of the rental stock. Last term when I ran around shaking hands with people, we found out that many homeowners switched to short-term rentals because they got tired of renting properties where they were fighting with their tenants. And in Vermont, trying to get somebody out of your house is major. In fact, Vermont needs a school because people can move in your house. And we can manage short-term rentals because there are three types. There's corporate, somebody who has a house and wants to rent a spot. And there's also the companies which manage their own stuff. But it is an issue, and Warren is working on it. And I submitted a whole document on how best to do it. And part of all of these rules, you need enforcement because there was no enforcement in there. But we do need to work on it. We need that rental property for people who can rent the season, the seasonal employees. So it can be fixed.
My sense of short-term rentals is that sure, it's becoming a thing. But I'll go back to how, and I don't think short-term rentals should become an issue to be fixed now and put effort and energy into it and lose sight of the fact that we need to build housing. Yeah, that's a foundational issue. That's a bigger issue. And I think eventually the market will catch up with short-term rentals to whatever extent is needed for regulation or having a registry and understanding more how they impact the economy. But again, the bigger issue is housing, building, allowing housing to be built, and let's not get distracted by other issues like short-term rentals. Could be not as, it is not as big of an issue as building long-term housing.
You know, in a housing crisis, everything matters, and there are people who are suffering and not finding rentals. We all know them. Um, so I think the most important thing to start with is information. We are missing information. We don't have a rental registry in the state. We do not know how many rentals we have. And that's a simple thing that you can add so that if you're a landlord, you register your property, and we have data. We know how many rentals. And that's not just for short-term rentals, but it's also dealing with emergencies. Like we've been doing. Knowing where people is important, and knowing the standards of housing in Berlin is important. So I would really encourage that we pursue that, and it's been in the legislature for a while, but been vetoed by the governor.
Warren Cox from Warren. Um, was think of something. Candice, you were in the government during this recent tax increase bill. So I'd be curious. I'm sorry, Eva. Oh my God. Sorry. You were in the government during the recent tax increase bill. And it was overwritten. What was your vote on it?
So the bill that you're referring to is the yield bill, which is a must-pass bill that every year the legislature uh, figures out how much all the school budgets in the whole state add up to, and then they have to figure out how to pay the tax. So it wouldn't be responsible to veto a bill like that. I think it was a political stunt. It was very useful during an election year, but the reality was that we had to come up with the money and try to do our best to limit the impact to property taxpayers without digging a big hole for next year, because that's what happened. So we were given an alternative at the last minute that would have provided more of a bridge funding, kind of less impact, but that would have dug a really big hole in our joint fiscal office, provides us with bipartisan information, told us that that would result in like $82 million of extra. I voted for the bill.
Judy Daly Moortown, and this question's for Dara. JJ mentioned the atmosphere at the State House, and you're the only person on the panel who's been at the State House. JJ, I'm sorry, I forget your word, but it was something along the lines of toxic, but I know that was not your word. But lack of working together is something that was brought up. Dara, can you talk about what efforts you've made in your time there to work tripartisan and with the governor, and what you would continue to do?
Thank you for that question. Like I said in my opening statement, my experience in the State House has been very positive in terms of collegiality. I sat right in among a lot of Republicans, and I had good relationships with them and in my committee, and learned alongside them. And I didn't really feel any kind of toxicity from other legislators. I think what we're hearing about is more between the administration and the legislature, and that's again not really something I'm not in leadership in the party, so I don't have a lot of access to backroom negotiations and things like that. So I can't really speak to that, but I did experience just in running again. I felt very thrown under the bus by the governor. I felt targeted as a legislator, and there were death threats because of the way he done the property tax increase that I didn't appreciate. So I think it's been politics.
Here, Alvin Warren, and I wanted to kind of follow on that question about working together in Montpelier, really for everyone. Every flyer I've got from the candidate says we're going to cooperate. I was at a meeting where I talked with Bill Scott the other day. He said the Democratic supermajority said it's going to be our way or the highway, and we're pushing through everything we want. Doesn't matter what you think. And he said that was the environment that he had. So, in going forward, how will you change that environment? And do you plan on continuing, particularly the Democrats, this push through whatever we want, regardless? And we've seen the effect of it with our higher taxes and future higher costs.
Well, there's Democratic representative ran four-term candidate. Well, I'm spoken pretty close. Is that okay? So there's a Democratic representative, John Hooper, four-term Democrat. His father, he took his father's, and he said the exact same thing. He said there's a problem. There's not representative government. Supermajority controls the Senate and the House. And he also further said, and this is an article written on Chronicle, that 10 people run the organization. So the only way to cure this is to reduce the supermajority. Just to elect independents. That helps change the dynamic because I'm a fighter and John's an Army colonel, so we're both fighters. We will go up there, we won't tolerate it, and we will work with people to solve the problems. But they have to leave their political ideas, their dogma outside the door, and let's sit down and discuss it. But it is true, the supermajority controls it. 12 out of the 13 vetoed, and they all will create economic atmosphere in the state.
So I mentioned I'm a lifelong observer. Since I was a kid, I had relatives in politics, so I was paying close attention. And it used to be okay. Both sides get something. They go home. And, it was politics. Now it's not okay. The majority does whatever they want. They make that very apparent. They don't even bother to say the platitudes of, well, we're going to lower your taxes. You can see Phil Baruth on video saying exactly what the question implied, that they just say, ignore the Republicans. You don't need to. We have the majority. We have the numbers. We're going to do what we want. You don't need to bother to even consider the opinions of the other side. That is unhealthy and unbalanced government. You know, in the old days, it would be, well, we're going to win this one, but we'll give one or two to the other side just for good feelings and the people in the state would.
Yes, I would say, I don't really think it's so much the supermajority being like a unit on all issues, and that really the vetoes that we see, a lot of them were very collaborative bills that were and then were anyway. So I don't know that you can read that much into it. I do believe that what we see, I think the bigger issue is really a different opinion of government and the role that it needs to play in the Vermont we live in today with the problems that we're facing today. I believe in a more expansive role for government because we need the services and the action of it to do what we need to do to face the climate challenges and the healthcare challenges and the housing struggles that we're facing. And others feel a different way towards government. And so I think that's the real tension. It's always been.
So without being in the legislature, I'm just hearing what we're all hearing. And it did seem like I always thought that Vermont politics were more respectful than national politics, although this year it didn't feel like that. It felt pretty divisive. And so I don't know where the breakdown um, went, or where it happened, but um, I believe strongly that people in the legislature need to work with the governor's office. I don't know if there's not enough communication. I'm not sure where the breakdown is, but we need to be able to talk to all sides, hear from all different types of people. And the governor is a very popular governor, and I've supported the governor. And I'll continue to support him. And I think it's really important to hear different points of view and solve problems. Like, we don't really care if it's the governor's fault, it's the legislature's fault. We just need to solve the problems.
Tim Senna from Warren. I'm wondering what your opinions are on term limits. We seem to have legislators and senators and governors that stay in for multiple. I would personally like to see longer term limits. What are your feelings on that?
Open to term limits. I think it's a good concept. I don't have hard numbers or specific time. Did you say you're open to more? You said longer terms. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, I'm open to the concept of term limits, and I think there's room for that. Certainly.
I would agree. I'd like to explore it in Vermont. I noticed a lot of senior senators who basically worked right up to the end. You know, we had those deaths, wonderful public servants, but you know, it does seem like at some point there should be term limits. We're going on 8 years with the governor, so I would like to.
I would agree with Dara and John. Term limits sound like a good idea. And I think, we look at these career legislators. Um, is that why they're just kind of going with the party line? And, I think you need to be brave, stand up for what you believe in. If that gets you out of, if you're voted out of office, you did that, well, okay. But, I think that being a career politician not great, and that there should be opportunities for other people to join politics, bring in new ideas, and move on.
Absolutely agree with term limits. When I ran for mayor in my Washington County, I proposed term limits because what I saw, this is kind of funny, but a friend of mine was elected in second term. The first got elected was our village. That was his village. That happens to politicians. That happens to people. So I would suggest something like 3 years for House of Representatives, for senators. You get two of those, and then you're out. Because the longer you're in there, and in New York State, these guys were in there for a long time. They became very powerful because they're owed favors, they get favors, and people come to them. And that is a bad situation. So I'm all for that. In fact, if you elect me, I guarantee you I'm not going to be there more than 2 terms because I'll be 80, what, 80, 86. I don't want to do that. I want to relax a bit.
Any more questions right here?
Hello, my name is Michael Gould from Fayston, and thank you everybody for doing this. We talked about need for unanimous on that. We also talked about need for some revenue. And just anecdotally, I'm looking around as I drive through the valley. There's a significant amount of empty houses. Second homes owned by people, oftentimes not even in the state. What are your thoughts about perhaps working this nexus, these three things, try to encourage people to either live in the homes and contribute to the valley, or pony up some extra cash, or their housing. So if we don't have any empty houses, we don't have tax base that's not a very limited amount of people. Thank you. So everybody, I hope.
I love that question. Had a wonderful time connecting with people all over the valley, season and in general. But recently, being in Warren, it's been heartbreaking to hear from people, to talk, feel the community diminished by just the absence, the emptiness. And that's something that we could do on a local level. It doesn't take the state, really. We could change the way the types of homes we incentivize. Like we could have size limits, our zoning. We could decide, well, we have already done some work that's going to make it harder to do the trophy home at the mountain with a big long driveway. We want to be intentional about where we build the housing and the type that we're building. It needs to be housing that fits the people that we have here. Small household size, older people. So, I think there are strategies that we could look at locally to have the kind of community that we really want. And then I think also on the state level, there's things that we could do with taxation on second homes, perhaps be a disincentive or reinvest that into good.
So I'm going to agree partially with Dara in that I think that there are some opportunities for making change on the local level that would solve some of these problems for folks in our county. A constituent was sharing with me, and I'm not going to remember the details, but he was visiting another a place outside the state recently and talked about there was some regulations about homes in the town centers of this area, and it was local legislation that made sure that people who bought houses in these concentrated areas were full-time residents. So that, so Warrenville, for example, like could we say we want to have full-time residents live in Warren Village, but if you're gonna have a second home on the mountain, that's not as concentrated and kind of as vibrant to the community center.
So it sounds like a good idea, but if you go look at who pays our school tax, if you go to the 30% of the school taxes are paid by second home. In fact, Act 60 was designed specifically to go after second home owners in ski towns. There are things we can do as a mayor. We actually changed dynamics. We did pass legislation as a tree ordinance. I'm not tree hugger, but we wanted to make sure that when they built the houses, they didn't destroy. So there are ways to deal with it. And if you look at second home, they provide the second biggest business in the valley. That's property management. I mean, if you look at the condos, all these houses, all the managers, that's a big income. So they are contributing. And the other part is the kids aren't going to school. So it's a good idea, but you're already paying a lot. And if you make it too high, guess what?
Yeah, big issue here. You're mentioning having them second home pay more money, pay extra cash. I've heard that. That's certainly the problem is the school system is broken. The education funding system is broken, right? So I'm not in favor of saying, hey, you can pay more, so pay more to pay into a broken system. My thought is fix the system first, have some fundamental structural reform on the education funding system before we ask people to pay more money to it. But your question also brings up, I see a lot of empty houses in terms of they look abandoned and they're no longer used. We have homelessness crisis, housing crisis and homelessness. I see a lot of empty houses just sitting idle and those opportunities for development. There's already a curb cut, a place to develop, something to work with. So
Hi, my name is Karen. I live in Warren. We've all talked about how the education system is broken. I'd like to know what some of your ideas for fixing it
Okay, fixing school funding. I think the formula needs to be just looked at. I couldn't really tell you what it is. I think a lot of us couldn't really say what it is. You know, that we vote on our school budgets and come up earlier, and then it comes out pretty high price tag, and nobody seems to understand how that happens. Um, I think there's opportunity for cutting some costs in the current school budget. You know, when you look nationally, enrollment is dropping nationally. Um, Vermont, we have the lowest teacher to student ratio in the country. We also are the third, fifth highest spending per pupil in the country. So, you know, there's some adjustments I think can be made without our suffering terribly. There are other programs like, I'll stop
There are solutions. One of the things that really irks me the most that Burlington gets how easy. I was a mayor of a town of 8,800 people. We supported our own schools. You know, teachers had no salaries to where we lived. We had a police department. We had so many services for the same amount of money I was paying in Vermont. We had no services other than schools. So we have to, the school system has to be redesigned. But the first thing I would do is say any community, 1,800 people, and has that revenue service, they can do it. And then we have to figure out how we're going to consolidate 120 small schools. The town of Whiting, where the suit came from, 150 people in the town, 30 going to school, and it's all farmland, so you can derive revenue from. So we have to look at how it's structured. So we have to get rid of it and start getting schools by mass.
Solution, how about a spending cap? Spending caps. There's ways to do this. And I looked today, there's 46 states that have some kind of limit spending cap. Vermont, 3 other states have this. Spending in, how about just a limit on education funding, education spending? You can only go up this much each year. Right now, it's a blank check. Who gets a blank check? What organization, what system has a blank check, unlimited funding? It's not reasonable, yet we allow it to happen. This local control idea is starting to seem to me like a myth. The only local control we have really is to vote our budget down, say no. And the idea that, you know, no matter how we vote, our taxes are still subject to go up because of the statewide system. And start over, burn it down, start over. Start over. I've heard this, we've had 27 years of experience, different laws, Band-Aids along the way. We got nothing there to figure out one way to do that.
We do have a committee that's convening right now, looking at different funding strategies, and that information is going to be available to the legislators by December. So there'll be some new models and structures to consider. The ones that I'm aware of that appeal to me kind of move away from the money following the student and give some fixed costs to the schools, so they have, you know, what the things that don't matter, like the student count doesn't affect. It's about the building, funded, more certain. And then the things that are more discretionary, uh, funded differently or voted on. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. I don't know about spending caps. I know we've had them in the past. Sometimes they lead to excess spending. And so, I mean, there's a lot of complexity there, and I'm really looking for expert opinions on this.
Anyone else with questions? Those are great.
I'm going to follow up with a question that the comments on that last question made me come back to. John, you alluded to caps, and you mentioned the Supreme Court decision, the Brigham decision, which required that all students in Vermont receive substantially equal education opportunities. That's why tax dollars go to Warren Burlington. It's not an option. Supreme Court law of the land. So, but there's other come on, you'll get your chance. There's other parts of this. So we're once again awaiting another funding study to help us out of the morass that Act 60 and Act 68 has landed us in. In the absence of those study results, which state in the country has a two-tiered education funding system like Vermont that might be adapted to Vermont's small population? And that question starts with
I don't know what that state is and what their system is. Well, Brigham, actually, all the Supreme Court said is equal education based on dollars. That was the wrong mistake. That was a big mistake. It didn't say how to do it. The legislators decided to do it. So the fact of the matter is that the legislators tagged on to what ACLU in regards to these small towns like Warren, they have great schools. Why don't we go? It was a poor decision. You should look at Burlington, $119 million budget, $31,000 for kids. That Act 68, Act 60,
10 seconds.
never intended to pay the schools. It was to fund small schools that didn't have money.
Eugene, John?
As you said, I heard you're correct. Substantially equal educational opportunity, and this is something I've researched and looked into. It's the job of, if I get to be in the legislature, that's what you do. But you find after Brigham, there's a lot of room for interpretation in there. Substantially equal educational opportunity. When you find in Act 127, 2022, the language says fully equitable. When you fully equitable, what's the difference between substantially equal education opportunity, which you can interpret in many ways and just maybe do a little better than the foundation plan to fulfill that? Now we're on a quest for. To me, that sounds like an impossible goal, but a good reason to just keep getting unlimited funding year after year in pursuit of this goal of making everything fully equitable. So that's part of our two-tiered system.
I'm on board with the equity need and goal that we have for all our students in Vermont, regardless of where you live. But what's been missing is accountability, and that's a problem. So we do have the big pot, and the money goes into it, and it gets doled out according to this complex formula, and we don't actually know if those outcomes are showing the investment. We don't know when we put the money in the pot and it gets distributed, we don't actually get that data back. So one of the big issues that for me that I think we need to work on is about accountability. And it means that our agency of education has to do a bigger job than it has been able to do in the past. We are going to need a lot more from them. And there's other states that have chosen to ignore the Supreme Court, and their operating systems are not equitable, and their time is going to work on being large.
So I would agree with a lot of what the other candidates have shared tonight. And going back to Eugene saying that the language is Brigham, I just made a note of this earlier, that the state must ensure substantial equality of educational opportunity throughout Vermont. So it sounds like there is some flexibility in terms of how the state gets to that point. And I mean, to me, that doesn't say every student must be funded at an equal level. It's talking about equality of educational opportunity. So I hope there's a different way to interpret that that allows us to make some significant changes in the current funding system.
Thank you. The next question we have, and we're going to start with this is going to Candice. Oh, I'm sorry, it's going to John. I'm sorry. In June, the legislature voted to override Governor Scott's veto of 7, the yield bill, leading to an average 13.8% property tax increase. Governor Scott proposed alternatives to reduce the tax burden and utilize unspent budget dollars while settling parameters for long-term cost control. Would you have supported overriding the veto And for Dara, why did you support overriding the veto despite these alternatives? How you justify the increased tax burden on Vermont residents, particularly given the governor's concern about affordability and structural reforms. And for the rest of the candidates, how would you have voted?
I would have upheld the governor's veto, right?
That was quick and easy.
I think I mentioned it earlier as we were talking about education, that the override was necessary because the veto was a sham. It was pretend, it was theory, and to make this election sound easier for people, good people who want to run and support the state, but thinking that this is going to be optional. You know, we have to support education. We had to pass that bill. And the alternative, which I liked the thinking, you know, the thinking was, could we lessen the blow by spreading it out over time, 3 years? I like that idea, but our state treasurer did not, and others knowledgeable about finance said that that was like a payday loan concept that would have dug a deeper hole for us, and then we would have to be in this terrible cycle. So I had to override. So I had to vote against before the override.
I feel like this is a lose-lose question. I think the yield bill was bad, and I think the governor's was bad too. So I don't know how I would have voted, but I didn't think that it was the right idea to take money from the general fund to pad it. That's not a long-term solution. So the governor's solution to put some money and to just take the pain away this year, it didn't solve the problem. So it's still a major problem.
I would have voted to support the governor. There are a number of reasons. We do already take money out of the general fund because, as I said before, 30% of the money is paid by flatlanders. We pay 28% of the money. That is a big deficit. That money comes out of the general fund. And what the governor said, what I heard, was we had a windfall profit that eclipsed for a lot of millions of dollars into the state. He said we could take that money this year and put it in a fund to lighten our tax burden and then go forward and see what we can do. Next year, the taxes are going up. They changed the CLA, which is a good technician. But what CLA actually says is the Department of Taxation figures out what your house is worth, not your list. There's a bill 480 where the state's going to take over, wants to take over assessing your property. And that's impossible. There are more than 300 villages and towns. To assess this, they're going to have to hire 600 people. So the governor was right. We forced a better negotiate. We have to pay the bill. That doesn't mean we can negotiate now.
So this is our last prepared question. Then we're going to go to a couple of questions that we received from members of the public who could not be here tonight, and then we're going to go to questions from each candidate or the other candidates. So my question to you guys is, why should we elect you over the other candidates? And that starts with, I have to find my cheat sheet, I'm not typing, that's the hardest part. That starts with Dara.
Well, I hope I've earned the support and trust of the voters in the Valley, despite a lot of difficult issues that we're facing. I hope that you understand that there aren't any easy fixes and there's nothing simple about the solutions that we have. That many of the issues are interrelated and national in scope, but we have a lot of good thinking and good hearts in this state, and much more collegiality than it's portrayed in the press. And I think we can do a lot. And I'd like to use what I've learned over the last 2 years to benefit our community. I hope I'll have your vote.
So I think that I bring a deep business experience to the job, and I think that's important You need to know how to work with the budget. You need to be sensitive to the business community. I think that a healthy business community is directly tied to a healthy community. So I think that background will be important. I talked about my professional experience. I work in communications, so I am a good communicator. I also believe I'm a good collaborator. I like to hear from all sides and, come up with ideas as a group, move forward and take the best ideas forward. Um, I think Vermont is a great place to live. I'm a big supporter of our public schools. Both my kids went through the public school system. So I will, work hard and work respectfully. Thank you.
Well, I think you should like me because number one, I've been in business where I've solved very complicated problems across the United States and internationally. And it's a way of looking at how do you solve a problem and then tear those pieces away. We talk about housing, but we don't know what kind of housing we want. We don't even know who's going to be in those houses. So we need to start dissecting these problems to come up with a solution. I believe that based on my business experience, my experience in public safety, and in government, I mean, I appeared before the legislature 4 times, and I was successful. I listened to what I had to say because I understood the issue and how to present that issue. I presented big national conferences all over the United States. So I think my background, passion to solve these problems and work with anybody give me a head up. I'm ready if I'm elected because I
10
understand
seconds.
all these issues. I already have some of the solutions.
So in the Army, when the commander says go, you say, yes, sir, ma'am, and you go. My job was. I was, I was the guy that said, wait a minute, have we thought about this? Did we consider that before we go and hurt me? So that experience, I think, is needed in state health right now, where it seems to me there's just blind following. Back in the interview with Jay Hooper, a 4-term Democrat, he's breaking the wall down and saying that this is what happens. There's less than 10 people in charge and everybody else follows. So my role, as I see it, is to go in there and to be able to say things that are uncomfortable, that need to be said, that need to be heard, and to be that change agent, that voice of dissent, because we're at a critical time where I think that's sorely needed, and I think background prepare me for that.
Thank you, John. We're going to go to some questions that were emailed into the Valley Reporter in the last week or so. John Stack of Aurora asks, I would like to know what the candidates think of to regulate short-term rentals in the Valley. Some communities out west that have faced this ever-growing problem prior to us have novel ways to deal, such as saying a certain percentage of homes in the area can be short-term to get on the waiting list, 1 in, 1 out. I live across the street from a house that was sold by an aging couple to a corporation. Now I have essentially have a hotel across the street. It is a commercial business in a residential street. I have concerns about safety, road wear, noise, community, etc. What really drives me crazy is that my taxes are going up because the value of my house has gone up because of the demand for more short-term rentals. To add insult to injury, these guys pay less in taxes than I do, since they don't have to pay certain taxes that I do. John, can start with you.
Okay, going back to the short-term rental answer earlier, it's private property. That's a fundamental to who we are. So it's difficult to get in and tell people how to do things, what to do with their private property. But certainly, like I said earlier, it's becoming an issue, and I think the market will catch up with, and the industry will catch up with itself in terms of some regulation, some help, some fixes for people that are in need of this, that are in these situations. Other than that, is it an appeal to the owners, the homeowners, the second homeowner? Hey, be part of the community more, be a better citizen, a better steward, be a better neighbor. So I think we're at an early stage of realizing the short-term rental is a problem. And I want to help people affected all I can, but private property issue that they have to factor in as well.
Yes, Warren has done really good work thinking through this, and starting with the registry is a good idea. And then considering what a permit program would look like, I agree that homes that are not inhabited at all by the owner, that are just used for Airbnbs, are not something that we would want a lot of in our community, versus someone who has an ADU or an in-law apartment that they're using to help them pay their property taxes. And I think it's really accomplished. I wouldn't want to limit those types of rentals too much. So I think it is very much a local decision on how to do this and how to do it fairly. And that's, I think, we'll see a lot of movement on, and we have a lot of examples we can take.
Candice?
So I think that the person who sent that question and brings up a really good point, and it reminds me, I read something last week, like 2023, 25% of single home sales nationwide purchased by funds or investment banks, so not by families. So it's definitely a growing problem. But as Dara said, I think that Warren is taking the right approach, and the rest of the county will learn from that. And once we have the data, we'll be able to make some decisions, regarding zoning and what we continue to allow. And I think that's the starting point.
So I agree with everybody said. John's point to private property, but these become businesses. And all those Airbnb, short-term rentals owned by corporations, should be treated like a hotel. They should subscribe to all the parking lots. As a constable, people used to complain to me, these guys are parking everywhere. Read Warren's zoning law. It has to be fixed, but they have the road track. Know who's treat these businesses separately. You make them comply to all the fire and life safety codes. You make them register who they are. It's a way to manage them as a business. Then you have the person who's home and they're making money. That's a little bit better. That person's more responsible for their property. And then the condos manage this. So definitely Warren's on the right track on how to register.
Thank you. This next question is from Jim Tabor of Waitsfield, and he writes, candidates' personal experiences and economic backgrounds shape their understanding of the challenges that many Vermonters face. Could you share how your own life experiences, including your professional and personal background, have influenced your understanding of the economic issues facing our community, such as affordability and the housing crisis? If you feel comfortable, you may also share how your financial situation informs your perspective on these issues. And this we will start with Dara.
So I came here over 20 years ago to Waitsfield from Colorado with an infant and a dog and my husband. And we had a very hard time finding a place to buy. We were able to rent, but we could not find a place that could afford in the valley. So we moved, came back. We really liked it. So the housing problem has been real for a long time for families with a lot of needs. And then, raising my family, I struggled to find jobs. So I did have to take a hiatus from paid work. I had to do a lot of different types of jobs while raising my family. So I think that's made me very aware of how important it is to invest in childcare and affordable housing, workforce housing. We need to.
So when I moved here in 2003, I bought a house for $260,000. I don't know if you could get a house like that today. And shortly after I moved, I was divorced my husband. So I had 2 young children, was also piecing together work because I left full-time in Boston, 1 and a 3-year-old here. And, as a divorced mother of 2, it's really hard to make a living as a freelance writer. So I went back to work as soon as my son was in kindergarten. We actually sent him to Warren for full-day kindergarten so that I could work full-time. And then I raised my kids as a single full-time working mother for 10 years. So I have a sense of some of those struggles. And I'm a big supporter of childcare.
So as I said earlier, I grew up in a Bronx, a low-income family of 4 in a one-bedroom apartment. And I didn't know I was poor until politicians. But I had a great life, and I had to work my way. I joined the Marine Corps. They gave me an excellent education in electronics. And the Marine Corps was an ironwork for a while, which was fun. Then I got a job fixing computers, and then I decided to move to college. Fortunately, the GI Bill helped me a lot. And I worked as a cement mason for 3 years in the dark. I paid good money for doing that, but I was terrible at it. So I couldn't continue my life as a cement mason, but it was good money and I had a lot of fun and kept in shape and skiing. And so I worked my way in corporate America as a problem solver. So I understand these issues. Again, kind of where I've seen some of these economic problems firsthand. So I think I can help solve those problems.
So when I got out of college, I decided I never want to be at the whims of the landlord. I bought a duplex in Washington, and that was a good move. It gave me security, a place to live, and a place to work on and grow. And I realized today, people don't do that. I can't do that. I think everybody cannot do that. It's impossible. It's so drastically different, the financial world. So I think that I use that to make it. It helps me be very empathetic and understanding of what people are going through. They should be able to do that. It's a very simple thing. Start a house, raise a family, have your own home, and they just can't do it. So I guess that translates into me being seeing the importance of allowing houses to be built.
The next group of questions are going to be ones that candidates have wanted to ask of other candidates. First question comes from Candice White. Go to Candice. Okay. Please share your political party affiliation or lack thereof and explain why you have or have not aligned yourself with
I'm a registered Democrat, and that really goes back to, I think the first presidential election I voted in was caucus in 1988. So I'm a registered Democrat because women's issues are very important to me. Women's reproductive rights were and were very important to me. I can't believe we're still discussing this, 40 years later. But I marched on Washington in 1989 to protect Roe versus Wade. I feel really good about the fact that Vermont has protected a woman's right to choose in the state constitution, but clearly that's nationally. So the Democratic Party, really because of their stance on women's issues, has been the party for me.
And honestly, about 15 years ago, I ran as a Republican for Secretary of State. The only reason why I did that was Republicans because they weren't doing a good job, in my view. And Rob Roper said, "Well, run for Secretary of State," which is fun. I got to travel around the state and actually learn issues and also learn how corrupt our whole election system is, and it hasn't changed. And I can discuss that later. So I'm an independent because both sides seem to have these dogmas that just aren't, and to me anyway. So for me, and like John, when I was in the Marine Corps, I disagreed sometimes. It's still private when I got out. But the point is, I believe that as an independent, I'm not encumbered by philosophies. So that's why I'm an independent.
So I'm from a strong Democratic family. My family was in politics to some degree. I grew up with that. It was around the John McCain era that I did not fit with the Democratic Party anymore. Did not fit with the Republican Party, and became independent. I'm amazed at independence feet when I walk around and knock on doors. A lot of people have just gravitated towards that, and maybe it is because of some our two-party system to be very polarizing. And, you have to ascribe to a certain set of beliefs, and I don't like doing that. I prefer to be independent in my thinking.
Yeah, I also am a Democrat, and I don't feel like I'm following some agenda. I feel like I share the values of the Democratic Party and investing in people and in communities, putting guardrails on markets and capitalism and things that have made it difficult to have a middle class. You don't have one unless you make it. And we're not going to be a resilient community, protected environment, flourishing wildlife, and all the things that we really need unless we invest in it, unless we have a risk-taking mindset. That's what I feel the Democrats bring.
The next question comes from Dara, and it's for all of you. Let's start with Jean. Legislative capacity in Vermont need to increase to address the increasingly complex issues we're facing in the state, for example, session length and resources. Sure. Does legislative capacity need to increase to address the increasingly complex issues we're facing in the state, for example, session length and resources?
Government has to work to allow more people to grow. I'm a conservative, and I believe the only real difference is I believe that we can solve problems without big government. They want to take over the legislators. They want to take over our what we pay in our CLA, which I view is unconstitutional. But I think when we go forward, we have to look at all the issues in small government, but a government that's smart and tuned, actually understands. The people in the state of Vermont work 1/3. You start understanding that capacity, but whoa, how are we going to fund all this 1/3? So I don't believe that the government should be that big. I think they should be clear, focused, and understand the issues, and understand the dynamics of our democratic system.
Read summary of the question. Oh my goodness, no, please no. Imagine it's anxiety producing enough when the legislature is in session in terms of what in the world are they going to try and pass next? What expenditure are they going to come up with next? Can you imagine that year round? So absolutely not. There's no reason to increase the legislative term. There's no need for a pay raise. I think they're resourced very well. Less is more. Question asked about mentioned that she was in favor of expansive role of government. I strongly disagree. And that ties into who we are as a nation. We're a liberal democracy. We're based on limited government. And when government gets out of the way, people will step in. People will do. When government does, people pull back, and they don't do.
Yes, I asked this question because I've been listening to everyone who is concerned about balance and how well our governments function. And I share your concerns, but I don't think balance is the issue, really. I think the issue is capacity. I think that we have very lean government. We have a very lean administration. Our agencies are not well staffed. And then the legislature, my first term, I didn't really know what to expect. We have the joint fiscal office It's wonderful. They do good work. But, look at how complicated our education system is. Look at what we have on our plates right now. And look at how little we accomplished last year. That felt bad, knowing what everyone was going to face with their bills. We want to do more. We want to do more effectively. I think we do need more time to do it. We need more data and more resources and help to
Without being in the legislature, having been in there, I really feel like I just can't answer that question. What I will say is that in terms of increasing resources, if that's paying legislators more, I think this is not the right time to be looking at that. We're facing so many other cost increases right now. So I would say that's not a good idea. And hearing Dara talk about, and I've heard her say this before, just addressing the real gaps and that they need more support. One thing I would say is I think the legislature needs to prioritize what's most important for Vermont. Like, there are a lot of great ideas, but what is most important? We've got to fix the school tax, the school financing problem. We've got to fix healthcare, affordable housing. If we do all that and do nothing else, that's great.
The next question for the candidates comes from Jean Bifano. Considering the supermajority's ability to ignore the governor's veto, who was elected by 70% of Vermonters, in essence removes any sort of meaningful dialogue and negotiations, and considering the devastating impact of those 12 veto votes will have on Vermonters and our economy, what can be done to mitigate their devastating influence?
Balance out the legislature. Hopefully, myself, Dean, Candice, new Democrat, new faces and new thinking will come into the legislature this session, willing to work together and move forward collaboratively, coming up with solutions that are just not. If there's no dialogue, there's no collaborative solution. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Again, I disagree. I think there is a lot of collaboration that happens. It could be better. It could happen sooner. It could be more efficient. But my concern is not with balance, as I said. I think the problem is that we need more firepower to address what we're coping with here. And we're not going to get it saying that we just need new people. We need who are empowered with information. People who have real partners to really serve and make sure that we have a thriving future.
Would you repeat that question again?
Sure. Considering the supermajority's ability to ignore the governor's veto, who was elected by 70% of Vermonters, in essence, removes any sort of meaningful dialogue and negations, and considering the devastating impact of those 12 vetoes will have on Vermonters and our economy, what can be done to mitigate their devastating influence?
When I think about what goes on in the legislature, again, I'm just observing the same way all of you are. I haven't been there, but it certainly sounds like there needs to be more regular dialogue, and we keep on saying more collaboration. Like, who's in the governor's office? Are they talking with the legislators? Like, I know that they might be of different political persuasions, but they're all on the same team. They're all supposed to be working together to solve problems to make Vermont better. So I would suggest that better communication would mitigate this, but I really don't know.
Well, I sort of in the fact that we talk about resources, but again, where do those resources come from? Who pays for them? hospitals. We came back from the hospitals. What we're going to do in the state house. I worked for the state for 6 months in Department of Health. Very good program. Millions of dollars. It was the worst experience in my life. It was I mean, I thought I was going to get an ulcer. And that's after spending 6 months in Vietnam with people pretending I'm a target. But we really have to focus on how we're going to fix that. And honestly, and I hate to be pejorative, but we have to change the amount of Democrats in the House and the Senate. And I'm not saying turn it all to Republicans because they'll probably screw it up as well. So I just think we need to focus on who we elect. And I'm an independent. I honestly don't think I know how to fix these problems.
And this question is from John Burns. A state representative's oath includes the agreement to act as a guardian of the people. Describe what this means to you and provide an example of how you act or would act as a guardian of the people. This question starts with Dara.
Yeah, I think that's the operating principle that we all follow. We're always thinking about how are the decisions we make going to actually play out, and what do we do if we get it wrong? And it's hard to get it right every time. So I think one of the things that a guardian needs to do is be able to admit when they need help. They need ground truth a lot, the people they represent, and they need to know how to apologize, and they need to know how to go back to the drawing board. And I have all of those traits, and I want to be a good guardian. Thank you.
So a guardian of the people to me means that you are representing your constituency and really looking out for their best interests in everything you do and every vote you take. And I think about some of my past experience and if it could fit into that category. But when I worked at Sugarbush, part of my job was to be in charge of kind of all of our community partners. We donated to a lot of different nonprofits, and a lot of the projects that we undertook at the mountain, it was important that they were good for the mountain, but we always thought about, is it good for the town? Because the mountain and the town are so intrinsically connected. So I think I know how to think in terms of looking at things from all angles and making sure this is going to benefit the business. This is also going to benefit the town. And in some of my nonprofit work, again, I've learned about different groups of people in Vermont in need. And, all these different needs need to be considered.
Well, that was a good one. I'm glad you guys went first because I didn't even have a clue. So I think to be a guardian of the people, I think everybody has to firm understanding of our Constitution and to value the rights of every individual and to respect every individual. I grew up in an environment where my parents said, you respect everybody. But then if you don't respect them, then you don't take anything from them. So I believe the government has to respect the people and what people have to say. And honestly, I think it's been a deaf ear in Montreal for a while. So the guardian is the person who I would represent you, represent any belief. So my job is to represent you, protect you the best I can, and work with the other people in the legislature to solve some of these really big problems. So my job is to work for you and make sure we're following the Constitution of the United States.
So I would act as the guardian of the people in terms of going back to the Global Warming Solutions Act to be sued. Wait a minute. Let's protect the people from lawsuits. Let's not have that in there. DMV fees we need to raise them. DMV said we don't. Well, let's protect people from increased fees. The DMV says they don't really need them. And it's just in general, the tax increase is over the years. Let's find a way to protect people from that so they don't have to move out of the state. So it's things like that that I think of. Those are ways to act as a guardian of the people. And I can also think of the Vermont Constitution too, when it talks about things like moderation, temperance, frugality. These are 200-year-old words, but do they still apply? I think they do. I think that would be helpful to think in those terms, and that would further be help me act as a guardian of the people. Employ temperance, frugality, moderation.
Okay, have gone through all of the questions from the audience and from the candidates' questions to one another, and we're going to finish up with a closing statement from each of you, and we're going to start with Candice.
So just in closing, first of all, thank you everyone for coming tonight. And thank you, Lisa and Eric. Um, I believe that we live in one of the most amazing places in the world. And, whenever I travel away from Vermont and I come back, I'm so happy to come home. So just recognizing how lucky we are, but also recognizing that we face some real challenges. Um, Vermont, I mean, who we have in our community and the work that goes into some of our, unpaid boards, it's amazing. So I have a lot of optimism, and I believe that, we can work together. Got to focus on what is really important, and we have some big issues. But if we work together, and we work respectfully, we should be able to solve these problems and make an even better place to live. So I hope you'll think of me when you're voting. Thank you.
Thank you guys for showing up and listening to us. It's better than when I was a mayor. Every now and then you'd look in the audience, there'd be nobody there. I was concerned when a bunch of people showed up. But the point is, I've been coming to Vermont again, as I said, for 30 years. We built our house, literally built our house with our developer. My wife learned how to play with rebar and bend lentils. I'm going to fight to stay here because I love this place. And I think, again, if we look at the issues facing us and look at the way to solve these problems, and you just can't say we've got housing, we've got to spend money. We got to understand what who this housing affects, who are the people who are unhoused, and dissect these problems. We can come to solutions. We got to remember only a third of the people in Vermont are paying, and the second homeowners are paying the rest. So I'm going to fight for you because I don't want to leave.
Closing statements already? Okay. Thanks for coming out, neighbor Dara. They sat us right next to each other. I decided to run in part because I know Dara's got a great heart. She wants to help everybody, much like our legislature. But we're trying too hard to help everybody. We're trying to do everything for everybody. And bigger government is not the answer. It creates more inefficiency. It frankly creates more problems. So this is kind of a calling that I heard the governor on the radio. He said, please run for office. I said, okay. I've got his endorsement, by the way. I didn't expect to be doing this right now, but I cannot do it. I hope to be able to go to the state house and be that voice that says those uncomfortable things that need to be said right now. Because to me, as an outsider, it just seems like it is follow the leader time, and that is not healthy.
Yes, thank you to everyone who showed up tonight and to these fellow candidates for stepping up, because there's nothing like running for office to really get to know your community yourself. It's an amazing experience, and I'm happy that more people are doing it. And I think that's another good reason for term. So I would say, having served, I always knew I was in a special place. I've always loved the Valley in particular. But having served, I've learned so much about Vermont and its weakness, its fragility, and its opportunity. And I'm in love with our state, and I want to keep working hard for us because we do have the big challenge we're talking about, especially as one of the oldest states in the country. So a lot of the things, the pressures we're feeling have to do with our demographics and how they've changed. And So we really do need to become a caretaker.
Um, I'd like to thank you, the candidates first for coming. Candice White, Torre, John, Bifano, whoever you're supporting, please make sure that you come on November 5th and vote. It's important who we elect as our legislators. I'd like to thank Shea Property Services and Valley Meade Dispensary and the Shea family for hosting us here tonight. It's good to be back in Gallagher's, isn't it? Without a bar, it's weird. It's okay. I'd also like to thank our partner here, Lisa Loomis from the Valley Reporter and the Mandarin Valley Chamber of Commerce and our members that make it all possible. And, did I forget anything? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And Medgar Valley Television. We love you guys. And there's lots of great stuff on there. So you can relive it all on Channel 44, right? Well, thanks so much for attending, everybody. Nice to see you.